how was the wolf hunt?
It was good. I'd say my only disappointment is this year I shot a small female. I probably should have taken my time a little bit more, but I've shot so many wolves there that my goal was to see a black one, and the first thing I saw was what looked very black on that white snow, so I shot it. When I got up there, it's probably 60% black. It wasn't 100% black, but I don't know. I probably should be pleased.
No, I mean that's the thing is a lot of the wolf stuff. I mean, it seems to be on everybody's bucket list. I know it's on mine,
Yeah.
but they're hard to hunt. They're not. Everybody's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh, you can just go shoot one. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. Like,
It's pretty tough. Yeah, it's tough.
yeah, it's super tough. I got a guy up there that I keep seeing at the Hunt Expo. It's called Goat Creek Outfitters, and
Okay.
the wolves that guy kills, like, are just massive. They're on a different level of size because
So where are they out of?
Alberta, are they in
Oh, really?
Alberta? But if you look up his website and you look at the caliber of wolves that he holds up, I mean, they're on another. I don't know. I guess they've got a different genetic breed or something up there.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a Google search and see because I was kind of disappointed in the one I shot, so I was thinking about going back in February or March, get a bigger one in Alberta.
Yeah, and he's like, that's the best. The nice thing about him is he'll put me on his list, and if he knows that the wolves are back in there real strong, he'll say, hey dude, come up here, come up here in the next week, and then you just stay right there with him. He's got big bear, he's got a lot of stuff, but the wolves are definitely on my bucket list for sure.
So remind me where you're based out of then.
I'm in Utah.
Oh, okay, so it's not too far to go. Well, you still got to go probably from Salt Lake there to Calgary or somewhere and then get over, but yeah, cool.
Yeah, just drive up. And he keeps bugging me. He goes, I need some guns, bring me some guns. And I'm like, well, I know a guy that can hook you up for that. So but yeah,
how long would that take to drive up then?
I don't know. It's a couple hours, but there's a lot of stuff. He hunts wolves and stuff. If Big Al Morris, they did a thing up there in that same kind of area, and I think he killed and it's on video, I think he killed 16 coyotes on one stand. He goes,
oh, wow.
The craziest thing you ever seen in your life. They just kept coming and coming and coming.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, dude, I'm lucky if I get a double, but I could only imagine. I want to say it was like 13 or 16 coyotes on one stand. And he goes, we just turned on distress, and he goes, they wouldn't stop coming. And we just shot and shot and shot. And I think they ended up missing like 3 or something like that. And it just blows my mind. But this guy says, he goes, you can shoot all the coyotes you want. He goes, they're in here so filthy that we can't get rid of them. But he hunts off a bunch of bait piles. So
oh yeah, that's what we're doing.
I mean, everybody's like, oh, they're so easy to call. No, they're not. They're you take a coyote and make it about 5 times smarter, and you got a wolf. It seems like.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So where were you when you shot your wolf?
It's called Sunero. It's kind of like 2 hours north of Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
So I drove there. It's about, I don't know, 10 or 12 hours. But yeah, it's a big lake. So basically he puts bait out on the lake and drills holes and puts it down in the ice, and they kind of keep coming to try to get it out of the ice. And it's just, they usually feed at night. So it's just hard in Canada. You can't shoot at night. So
right. I learned a lot about wolves in the last couple of years because, with this stupid reintroduction into Idaho and Colorado, those aren't the wolves that were there. They're a different breed, and they're bigger. Yeah. They're bigger than what they were there. They're more of like a half-breed timber wolf. But the timber wolves, the big timber wolves, are on a whole nother freaking level. I mean,
oh yeah, totally.
They're gigantic. The ones I thought he had AI done all these wolves, but
oh really?
No, they're big. So you see these guys just like trying to hold a wolf up as tall as they are, like this, just holding it. And I'm like,
so I wrote it down. So you said it's called Goat Creek Outfitters.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, I'm gonna look them up.
Yeah. They're a different level, and that's why I want to go up. That's why they're on my bucket list. I mean, there's a couple guys that always message me like, "Hey, there's some wolves up in Idaho," and they shoot them, and they're definitely bigger than a coyote. But yeah, I want if I'm gonna go after one, I want a big boy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I appreciate you coming on. I've been meaning to get you on for a while. I had a couple of your guys at the Hunt Expo last year that we kind of just did a simple little podcast. But
sure,
the way things have changed over the last few months, I did a post the other day on my personal, And I said, hey, what does everybody think is going to happen with these being deregulated, delisted, not deregulated, but the tax stamp fee going away, should I say?
Yeah.
And I got so many people with so many different answers. And it's like anything else the ATF does. Who the heck knows? We're just going to hold on for dear life and see.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of go over that with you. I wanted to go over Silencer Central because you guys have sponsored us from day one, and you guys have helped us out a lot. A lot of people are super impressed with the cans when I take them around, and just kind of get everybody on the same page as far as suppressors. Everybody calls them silencers or suppressors, and there's a big mix up of what they really are, because they don't really silence anything, but they make it a lot more pleasant to shoot, I guess I should say. So let's start the conversation here. Give us a little bit of the backstory of Silencer Central, because you've done a phenomenal job of growing that company into what it is. So give credit where credit is due, but give us a little bit of backstory there.
Yeah. So, when I first moved to South Dakota, my wife is from South Dakota. I grew up further south, Alabama, North Carolina, Georgia. But when I moved to South Dakota, I could tell my in-laws are really into firearms. So I was like, I need to figure out something to get a little bit more involved in firearms. I always grew up around them in the summers, my uncle and grandfather, but my parents never really had any in the house. So went to the gun store and asked them what they do here. And they said a lot of people shoot varmints. And I took that to mean prairie dogs. Really, I think they meant coyotes, but I took it as prairie dogs. So I started shooting prairie dogs and decided that it's painful to drive 4 or 5 hours west. And as soon as you shoot, they go in the hole. So that's when I decided I probably needed a suppressor, just kind of that idea of making it quiet. Problem out here is so windy that because there's no trees, it's a prairie, that if you try to caliber down, like shoot a 17 or even a 204 or something like that, the wind just moves that bullet if it's too light. So the only way to really get it quieter was to look at a suppressor. So bought a suppressor. I kind of had a bad experience. I think they could tell I wasn't 100% born gun guy. Like I just had a lot of questions that they just didn't really want to answer, and they were kind of rude to me. So after buying 2 there and really loving them, then I decided just to get my own license to do it myself. And it's kind of expensive to have your own license. You got to maintain it and all that stuff and all the compliance. So I thought, well, I might as well just sell a few, because I'd done pharmaceutical sales after pharmacy school. So I started South Dakota Silencer, is what it was called then. And I worked at gun shows in South Dakota. And honestly, my sort of take on it, because remember, this is face to face. I'm like the only guy working the booth, so everybody wants to buy one's talking to me. Really, 100% of the issue for most consumers, gun owners, hunters, target shooters was the process. Mm-hmm. So, I thought to myself, gosh, if I could make the process easier, I could sell more stuff. So it was kind of a simple, sort of objective is, how do I make the process simple? Now, of course, they didn't really know anything about the process, the consumer. A lot of them thought they were illegal. So it was really hand-holding them. I used to carry this little like banker's box of all the forms and all the products I sold. It was all filled out with all the information except theirs, because this is back when you do them all paper. And then I would just fill out the stuff they needed at the show. And then back then you had to take it and get your sheriff to sign it. And anyway, that's basically how I started it. But then as I worked shows, silencers are essentially treated very similar to a handgun. You can only buy from someone that's licensed in a state where you have an FFL license. So, I would work shows in the northwest part of the state, and I would, meet people from Wyoming, and I would meet people from Montana and even North Dakota. So I just started getting additional licenses. So when I worked shows, like if I was in Aberdeen, South Dakota, having a North Dakota FFL and being able to sell silencers in North Dakota was advantageous. So I don't know why, but at one point I had North Dakota Silencer and South Dakota Silencer, and I had 2 different websites, 2 different business cards, 2 different brochures, complete pain in the you-know-what. I don't know what I was thinking. Not very bright when I first started, I guess. So then I eventually called it Dakota Silencer, because my third location, so I did South Dakota, North Dakota, and my third location was in Dakota County, Nebraska. So I thought, well, let's just call it Dakota Silencer. And then, it's funny, as I started growing more, and I probably got maybe 14 or 15 states, as I got further away, like when I would go to Wisconsin, I could hear people, and they were asking so many questions about the name of the business. I'm like, clearly they're confused. Like they don't think I could sell it to them because they hear Dakota. And I mean, before when you were on just states that directly bordered the Dakotas, a lot of people thought it was cool because that's usually where they came to hunt. But then when you start meeting people further away, so that's when I decided to change the name to Silencer Central. And that was like, late 2018 is when I made the decision. Didn't really roll it out till 2019 once I had the trademark and domain name and everything buttoned down. But yeah, I would say our goal really as a company day one has been how to make the process as simple as possible. We basically found a statute that no one was really using that allows you to ship firearms and or silencers directly to someone's front door. The catch in that statute is that no background check is required, and we don't have to do a background check because ATF already had it done by the FBI prior to them sending us an approval. So because of that, we've just really worked with ATF to figure out how do we make it simpler? How do we automate? How do we digitize? How do we continue to do things and make them easier? So really for the last 20 years, since 2005, we've scaled up to be in every state where silencers are legal. So we're in all 42 states. So we have physical location, physical FFL. We pay income tax, sales tax, everything in those states. And then we've made the process super simple where customer can sit on a couch, buy a silencer, and we can ship it right to their front door. And we've just seen the business evolve where, that went really well during COVID. So I think that really helped. Good springboard for us to get started because before we were only events. So we had to come up with something to, how do we stay in business? Well, let's do direct to consumer. So we started advertising that and doing that. And that worked out well. And then when the approvals got quicker, that worked out well. And now that the $200 stamps, officially going away, yesterday, then that's going to hopefully only make things even better. So it's been a gradual process of deregulation plus just, working with ATF to make it quicker. So it's kind of our history in a nutshell, I think, for Silencer Central.
Well, I mean, one of the big things is like, even as a SOT myself, the first time that I got something from you guys, I'm like, wait, you can do this? Like, how in the heck? Because there are so many loopholes. When I was a, I guess, influencer or whatever you want to call me for Silencer Co., they kind of did the same thing and it did a payroll thing. And, there's always ways to do things. And I guess that was the biggest thing was the education of the public. Like, hey, you can actually do this and it's very simple to do. And you don't just sell your suppressors, you sell everybody's suppressors for the most part, from what I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So people do ask me sort of like the evolution of Banish. I mean, really, it was just a situation where I was selling so many silencers, no one could supply me. So and the good thing about Banish is we sell it now to other dealers via wholesalers. We sell to buy groups. We sell, so it's available pretty much everywhere, not just us. And then, but you're right. We sell every other silencer. Being honest, there's some silencer manufacturers that see us as a competitor, even though we tell them we're kind of two separate companies. We're Silencer Central and Banish. They see us as a competitor and they don't want to sell to us direct. I mean, we think that's probably some of our competitors telling them not to sell to us. But for whatever reason, I can think of two offhand that, won't sell to us direct and we have to buy through a wholesaler, but we still sell their products. So we have, pretty much everything that sells that people want, we have on our website, we sell it.
Yeah, one of the big things that I've noticed lately, and I think the no fee is going to drive this, but I'd like your take on it. But I've seen a lot of Tom, Dick, and Harry's come out with a suppressor in the last, I don't know, a few months, ever since it was sent out. I've been testing some other people's suppressors, and the quality is just absolute garbage. And it's hard because I'm sure when you guys came out with the Banish, I know you guys have got like V1s, V2s, different versions of it because you're growing and you're adapting. But I've tested a few of them lately, and I've done a couple stories about it. Like these suppressors make my rifle shoot like literally a 4-inch group, and I put a Banish or one of the other ones on it, and then it goes back to a 1/2-inch group. And the welds, the quality that they're screwed together in, and everything else. And I see a huge problem with the quality of people that are going to, number one, supply these, but then buy them because they're like, oh, this is going to be a cheap suppressor. I don't have to pay the $200 tax stamp. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't think we're going to sell anymore not having the $200 tax stamp. I think you're going to sell double what you were selling because there were a lot of people that just didn't want to pay it. And I don't know. That's my feeling, but I'd like to know what you think on that.
Yeah, so good question. I would say that our first day without a tax was yesterday, and I would say that a lot of what we sold were lower price silencers. And I think that, like you said, there's probably people on the fence that thought, "Gosh, I don't want to spend, 500 or 600 bucks for a silencer and then pay the tax on top of that." It's probably just a stretch for them, whether it was financially or just the whole idea of giving the government money. But it seems like a big chunk of our sales yesterday were sort of the lower dollar products. We even stocked out on some of those, which is good. I mean, because honestly, I see comments online. We were running a tax stamp for most of last year. And I know people are like, well, if you could afford to do that, why aren't you doing it now? I mean, the honest truth is my bank had to float me for the last 6 or 7 months. I just told them I'm not going to make any money. I want to keep everybody employed here because I'm going to need them in 6 months. So I don't want to fire everybody. But I mean, the bank had to float me, $15 million loan just so that I could give that tax stamp away for free so that we could then also buy silencers to have an inventory when it hit January 1st. I get a lot of questions about the cheaper silencers. I mean, if I interview other FFL dealers, SOTs that sell silencers and ask them about the time involved, I think a dealer will tell you they probably have an hour to an hour and a half involved with a silencer. And that's from you coming in and you're filling out the paperwork, then they're data entering it in to put it into the ATF e-forms. Then they're certifying it for you to look at it to make sure they filled it out right. Then it's submitting it to the ATF, uploading your fingerprints, taking your fingerprints, getting your photo, uploading your photo, then getting an approval coming back to you. Then you're coming in and filling out a 4473 and leaving with it. Dealers got an hour and a half involved in that. So, people talk about margins. I mean, what the problem is, they need a good margin to be able to deal with that much paperwork. If they can sell you a Glock in 5 minutes and make a couple $100, but then they have to, work on a silencer and spend an hour and a half and only make $25, the math just doesn't work. So I think that there's a lot of manufacturers out there thinking, oh, this will be great, I'll sell a lot of cheap stuff. I think that dealers are going to push back on that. And I do like your point too about like the evolution. I mean, the reality is we had one manufacturer for a long time that made everything for us. And then it got to the point where they couldn't keep up with us and we had to start transitioning to other manufacturers. And I can tell you firsthand, it's very difficult to get all the things to align. I think people look at a tube and they're like, oh, a tube, that's pretty easy. Throw some baffles inside, make it cheap, it'll sell. There's a whole lot more to testing and, making sure you're getting it hot and make sure it's not brittle. And like you're saying about making sure accuracy and all of and that's why we always, with the Banish line, typically only outsourced to people that had military contracts. One, because most of ours are made out of titanium, and people that are used to the military with different missiles and different type of weapons where titanium is light and they're used to machining it because it's a harder material. They were really the best to work with, but also they had standards that they had been set that they had to follow with the government. So it was perfect for us to go into them and say, hey, we'd like you to use those same standards on the silencers that you make for us. And we'll give you enough volume where it's worth your time so that there's still enough margin in it for both of us when we go to sell it. But I would say that I'm also skeptical sometimes of people that are new at it and don't have much experience. And, are they carrying enough insurance? I mean, I probably spend $1 million a year just insurance. So if someone's hurt, we've never had that, knock on wood, but if somebody was, I mean, we got plenty of insurance to cover stuff like that. But other manufacturers, you got to worry about that kind of stuff. And then also the industry, the standard in the industry really is kind of a lifetime warranty forever, fixing everything, even stupid. So, at some point, I'm not sure everyone's going to be able to do that. We don't have a ton of warranty claims, but if a company did and you may not see it for 4 or 5 years, I could see it putting somebody under if you don't have a good stable company that's kind of used to the market and knows what they're doing.
Well, yeah. And to that point, like if it's a welded can and you can't, take your baffles out, that makes it even worse because if you haven't shot with a suppressor enough, if you haven't screwed something up, something comes loose, fearful auto. I've shot a can off before. Luckily it just shot off and I don't know how it didn't break baffles or anything else and it was still fine. But I think that is a big point. Like, and then if something does, my big issue is between direct thread. Silencer Co. had that issue in the beginning where they had that 40 tooth design and then they went to 90 tooth because they kept coming loose and then they've got a little bit of flex in them and you're blowing baffles out and everything else, which is scary. But, like Kyle Grove, he's been a good friend of mine forever at KGM. They've built a lot of great cans. I know you guys are carrying them now. And there honestly are only so many people that can weld with that, the way they weld. And there are a lot of new CNC welders coming out that they're doing things, but you still got to know how to run it. I mean, that's been a big thing.
Yeah, and I think we only have one supplier that does our welding, and what's made me comfortable with them is they're taking every 250th and sending off those welds and having them cut, and use the same kind of military standards they would for their military contract. They cut them open, look at them underneath the microscope, make sure there's no issues. Kind of hold in the back before they ship them to us to make sure that when they're checking every one by cutting them open that they're good. So you're right, though. Most of them that have had failures in the industry, it's from welds. I mean, knock on wood, Vanish, we've never had a, issue, but you're right. There's a lot of, even the larger names have had issues with the welds that have been doing it a long time.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If you were to choose between a direct thread and a taper lock or something else, which one would you rather go with?
Well, I'm a hunter guy. So direct thread's easy. You can't screw it up, I mean, I remember one day I did a silencer testing where I took a silencer of one of every manufacturer and brand out of the safe, called the people and said, hey, can we test it? And then we'll give you the numbers of yours that's being waiting for, or even some we had extra. And I think we took like 50 silencers out there, and I had nothing but what I would call gun guys. And we still launched 3 or 4 downrange with these QDs, thinking you had them on right, because some of them are so different. You think you have it locked down, and then it just goes downrange. So to me, direct thread's the best. And almost what I do is hunting. I mean, also, I do have a tendency to shoot the full autos. I love MP5. I love Uzi. I got a Glock 18. So I do a fair amount of full auto. I guess that would be on the tactical side, but I've never had a problem with direct thread. So for me, direct thread is simple. It's typically quieter. It's typically cheaper because you're not having to get adapters to try to put everything on. So my personal preference is, direct thread. Because some people are like, oh, I want quick detach for everything. And I'm like, well, it's not really quick detach. You're still having to twist it on. And I don't know. I used to have a, they make those tri-lugs or whatever. I used to have one of those for a while. And I would get baffle strikes just because it would rotate enough. And yeah, I don't know. I'm probably biased, but I do like direct thread.
Right. And there are a few taper lock systems that keep the back pressure and crap coming backwards. But, like at Straight Jacket, we make those threads so they're not like a hot dog in a hallway either. And I'm sure you guys do as well. But, on a lot of the AR-15, they're loose so you can screw anything you can on it. But knock on wood, I've never baffle striked a direct thread because it doesn't, even if it comes a little bit loose, it doesn't give it enough. You still have a few thou variants in there. Even if it does come loose a little bit, you're not doing it. You'll notice when it starts to give you a little bit of back pressure, but I think that is a big thing. In my opinion, I'm there with you. I would rather have direct thread.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm a hunter. The titanium, I still to this day, if you don't hunt with a suppressor, you should. And it was funny because a friend of mine got on my post, and there's a whole lot of comments on there of people just going back and forth. And there's a few of these old duffers like, you guys are just pussies if you don't shoot with, a break, or you shoot with this. And it's like, man, you apparently do not like your hearing, because if you don't want to shoot with a suppressor, and not to mention, I've preached it. I'm like, if you ever, God forbid, miss a little bit or anything, suppressors will give you a follow-up shot almost every time, because the animal's sitting there like, what in the hell just went past me type thing.
Totally.
What suppressor of yours do you like the most? Which one you would carry the most on your stuff?
So I do like the Banish Backcountry, just because it's short and it's lightweight, 5.5 inches. So by the time you screw it on, you got less than 5 inches on the end, a little bit fatter. I was concerned it wasn't going to be quiet enough for me because it's shorter. But once I shot it, I was like, I went on a hunt with my daughter, and my team staff set it up for me. So when I got there, I was like, oh, it's going to be loud. But once I shot it, I was like, man, it was quieter than other people that had long ones. So that's my favorite really for hunting. It is a welded can, so you can't take it apart and clean it, but, that's all right. I don't shoot it that much.
Most people won't. Everybody's like, oh, I need to, take it apart. I need to do this. And I'm like, if you're not shooting a few thousand rounds a year, you're never going to dirty that can enough to make it have that much issue. I mean, I guess if you're shooting filthy powder, that's one thing. And that is an issue that we've seen in some of these new powder offerings from some of the big companies, is because that's the only powder they can get. They are filthy. Yeah. And so rimfire cans, they've always been dirty. In the beginning, the way they were designed, if you tipped your rifle up, all that crap would come back down. When I was at Voodoo, we had to change our breeches a little bit, so much crap would come back down the barrel.
Interesting.
But there's so many variations that have come to play in the last little bit, and everybody seems, like I'm looking at your website right now. Nosler has theirs, and Dead Air, of course. Bergara's got one that you guys have, and it seems like every big company is coming out with a suppressor as well. But I mean, what, in your opinion, there's a lot of good suppressors out there. What makes the Backcountry or the Banish series or the Silencer Central stuff? What makes it better, in your opinion, than a lot of these other options? Because I know they are, because I've tested a lot of them, but I want to kind of have your feedback on that.
Yeah. Well, like I said, almost think of like Silencer Central and Banish as two separate. So the benefit that Silencer Central has is they manage all the paperwork and mail it to your front door, and then you could basically get anything. But then the Banish specifically, I would say that we were probably the first people to go after the hunting market. A lot of people just kind of felt like the only market was tactical, and they focused on tactical. And it wasn't me being some genius thinking, wow, there must be a lot of hunters out there that want to shoot quiet. It was just in my market here in the Dakotas where I started, they were 100% coyote hunters. So I used to always say the joke at the show, if you call 3 coyotes in, how many of those 3 do you want to kill? And the answer is you don't want to kill 3, you want to kill 4, so it's like, quiet is better, lightweight is better. So I do think that, that's a benefit the Banish has. A lot of titanium, a lot of lightweight. Titanium is going to last forever. It's stronger. Most of ours, with the exception of the Backcountry, most of them do come apart to clean. Probably our best seller is the Banish 30, that version 2 that just came out recently. People like that. It's modular. You can make it short or long. I feel like the titanium is really the way to go, just because it is easier to clean if you do need to clean it. Even if it's sealed, it's easy to clean. You don't have to worry about using too aggressive of a cleaner. If you ask any CNC machinist about titanium, they'll tell you it's really hard on their cutting equipment. It's typically hard to source. You can't get titanium in the US. So it's sort of an exotic material. And most people that are buying from us, we give them a free trust through Silencer Central. So they're planning on keeping it for, maybe a couple generations, passing it down to kids, grandkids. So the ability to be in titanium just means you're going to get something that's going to really last forever, honestly.
Yeah. I've tried to mess with titanium, and it is not fun. It's an absolute pain in the butt to deal with. And I guess that is a good thing, outsourcing it to somebody that's really good at machining it, because that is, to your point, that is a very hard thing to do. So I did a video a while back of the Banish 30 Gold, and it was on a 6.5 PRC. And people were like, there's no way that's a 6.5 PRC. I'm like, no, that's a 6.5 PRC, because the sound of the steel, I think it was like at 660 yards or something, you could hear the report of the steel like crazy. And they're like, no way. And I'm like, yeah, it is a little bit bigger. My personal preference is I love the Backcountry. I actually have like 6 of them now.
Oh, wow. Cool. But
I still like a little bit more volume in it, especially when I get into my big stuff, like my nozzlers, my rums, the big stuff. I like the more volume, and I'm willing to carry a little bit more with it. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, a suppressor is going to make it recoil harder. It's going to, and that's a myth, I believe. You actually have a little bit better recoil, but in a lot of cases, if it's a good solid suppressor, you actually get better groups. You get it whatever it does, whether it messes with your harmonics on your barrel, whatever it does seems to do that. Have you guys seen that a lot with your suppressors?
Yeah, absolutely. So good question on the Banish Gold 30, because that really is one of the quietest ones. Even if you look at industry tests, it always ranks in the top 2 or 3. It's super, super quiet. And it comes apart. It's all titanium. I do like that. And you're right. I mean, I know I used to go to some of these like exhibits with the riders, and, Weatherby would be shooting their really heavy stuff. And, I was like, listen, put this gold on there. He's like, I don't think it'll handle this 3378. I'm like, no, try it. And then everyone's like, kind of a standing ovation, like, wow, I can't believe how quiet that was. But your question on recoil, we were talking earlier, I was hunting last week or actually earlier this week in Canada, where you can't use a suppressor. So it's always a reminder to me, the recoil without a suppressor versus with a suppressor. But if you look at our data, whatever you're getting typically with a really good brake is what you'll get with a suppressor. So you're not really losing anything by taking your brake off and replacing it with a silencer. But if you're taking, if you've never had a brake on it and you put a silencer, you see about 40 or 45% reduction in recoil, which is nice, obviously. Then you can typically caliber up. Maybe someone that's more sensitive to recoil could use a bigger caliber than maybe they would wanted to use before. So that's a benefit there. But yeah, that Gold does do a really good job of working on the recoil reduction and sound.
Yeah, and one thing we push at Straight Jacket is it's like, okay, well, barrel length, everybody wants shorter and shorter and shorter so they can go suppressed. And it's the big question. Yeah. Everybody's like, oh, I want a 22-inch 300 PRC. Okay, that's fine. Are you going to suppress it? Yes. Okay, then you're perfect. Because the suppressor does give you a little bit of that velocity back in the pressure, right?
Yeah.
And that is a big thing. Like everybody seems to want to do that 20 to 22-inch barrel length is everything. And I guess that is something to think about that I never really have is like, if you're running that slow, depending on what powder you're running, your burn rate and a lot of that powder does go into your can. So if you're shooting a lot of 300 PRC, 7 PRC, any of that stuff, you probably want something that you can clean a little bit better. So in your opinion, what is the best way? And let me preface this. I've seen people put cans in ultrasonic cleaners and just destroy them. So what is your opinion on the best way to clean your suppressors or anything that you carry?
Yeah. So, that Banished Gold you're talking about, 30 comes apart to clean, and it's got a ton of baffles in it. That's why it's quiet. It's got a lot of little baffles. So, I would take the baffles out and I would soak them in, 50/50, that CLR, that calcium lime rust remover. It's basically like acid. So do 50/50 that in water. Let it sit in it for really as long as you want. It'll eat that carbon out. And then I would just run a brush on the inside. You could use simple green, whatever you want on the inside, almost like you would clean out a baby bottle. And then, you may want to use a pressure hose just to pressure dry it out and then put it right back together. It should be perfect. But I do find that CLR works really well of eating the carbon up. Especially like you're talking about, unburnt powder and just carbon buildup. You just have to be careful. If you wait too many rounds, like if you wait several hundred rounds, sometimes it can be hard to get open. So it just almost clean it more often than you think you would, because then it's easier to get apart and it's easier to put it back together and get all that carbon out at once.
Right. And then on your like the backcountry, what do you recommend? Because you don't want to eat the coating off of the outside of the candy.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're right. Because like we use Cerakote that's baked on, but you're right. Sometimes it'll take that off when you put it in a sonic cleaner. So, what I've seen people do is almost like put a piece of duct tape on the front of that backcountry and then pour that solution in there and then just let it sit in it overnight. And it'll eat up the carbon and then just rinse it out with water. I mean, we do like water-based stuff because you don't have to worry about anything blowing up if something accidentally stayed in there and you went to shoot it, So water-based stuff seems to be the way to go. And I do like that acid and that CLR mix. But yeah, you could just find a way to cover that hole, pour it in the same end you would screw it in on the rifle with, pour your solution in there, let it sit a night or two, and then just rinse it out with water and you should be good to go.
Yeah, and I want to hit one point on that real quick. From one thing that we see a lot is people just leave their suppressor on and just keep shooting it. One of the biggest things that you need to do as somebody listening is making sure that your crown of your barrel is staying clean, because with the amount of carbon that's coming out of that and going into the suppressor, you do get back pressure, the end of your barrel. I've seen people start losing groups, accuracy start failing off, and they blame it on a whole bunch of things. And a lot of it, they're just not keeping their stuff clean. And that is a big thing that people really need to think about as they shoot, especially going back to the filthy, dirty stuff like rim fire, especially anything that's got just a crap load. And the lighter the barrel or the shorter the barrel, the worse burn rate, depending on your burn rates of your stuff. So make sure that if you're listening, you're paying attention to that and kind of go down a checklist of doing that. Now, I kind of want to change gears just a little bit because I got a lot of questions about your thoughts on what's going to go on with the ATF. I saw a bunch of posts the other day, or it was yesterday, that they pretty much broke the ATF website because so many people were trying to put it in. What, in your opinion, first off, let's go down, I guess, a list so we're not going crazy, but was it smart delisting the $200 tax stamp? And let me say this, that actually a lot of that money went to a lot of conservation. It was supposed to, right? The $200 tax stamp was supposed to go to it.
We had proposed that in some legislation. We got pushback for it, but honestly, it just went right into the Treasury. That $200 went straight into the Treasury, and it wasn't earmarked to anything. ATF didn't get any of it. It just went right in, so it could go anywhere. Ukraine or what. It went straight in there. So it was really not earmarked for anything.
So I guess that's the question is, they have all these people that are going to have to run all this paperwork now, and I guess that money eventually was going to help pay for a lot of that. But is that gonna mess everything up? Not having, I'm trying to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Yeah.
Like, was it good to be paying a $200 tax stamp, or is it going to be just fine not even worrying about it?
Yeah, good question. So, even step back a little bit further. So, I think some people felt like that Silencer Central likes to keep the process in place, which, I try to explain to people. And of course, I don't have a big enough platform like you do. But, at the end of the day, we make a lot of money off Banish. I mean, we did over $100 million in sales of Banish last year. So if you think about it, there's 80,000 FFL dealers in America, 20,000 of them have an SOT. So about 25% of FFL dealers are selling silencers. So if they got deregulated and they were treated like a regular firearm, now you got 100% of dealers selling silencers because it would be just like a regular firearm. So our Banish sales would have quadrupled. So when people think we were trying to keep it simple with Silencer Centrals because we keep it simple, no, we would prefer it to been completely deregulated and treated like a regular firearm. And then that gets into a little bit of discussion about the pay part. So because the silencers previously, and I guess still are, an NFA item, there was never any kind of tax on it. You hear people talk about the Pittman-Robertson tax, where it's like a 10% or 11% based on, if it's a handgun, long gun, or ammo. If the HPA in the full form had gone through and they were treated like a regular firearm, then that 11% would have been added, and that's paid for by the manufacturer. And then assumption is it would be passed on to the consumer in the price. So the prices probably would have gone up on silencers, but it would have funded, that money would have gone 100% to conservation. So thinking about, just thinking about like the $200 now versus before, all silencers that I've seen, just because they're so hard to export, are all made in the U.S. And so we know the benefits of, manufacturing in the U.S. It's going to help create jobs. When people have jobs, they're paying taxes. So the thought is that if you have more Americans that work manufacturing, then it's a win. So I feel like that obviously the amount of silencers sold is going to go up. I think that $200 tax before, since it was going into a general hopper, basically the general treasury, who knows where it was going. And I wouldn't say there's anyone who's fiscally responsible in DC. So by making it go away, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think what gives me a little bit of heartburn is if we change administrations, which we will, you're never going to have all Republicans, because right now we got Republicans in the Senate, the House, and in the White House. So if it switches, it could go back and they could make it a $500 tax. So that worries me a little bit. But just looking from a fiscal perspective, I mean, ATF is fairly dialed in now, I feel like, on their e-forms. I mean, I know they had some hiccups, today, and, we've been in contact with them and working through that. And I think they'll figure it out. It's just they had to open up their bandwidth maybe more than they thought was going to come through. But I feel like they're fairly dialed. So the cost they're spending on this, it's already in the budget. I mean, when you have problems again is when the administration changes, because they'll quit resourcing modifications and updates to e-forms. They'll continue to make it harder if you get Democrats in the presidency, typically, because then they get to a point who's the head of the legal and also the head of the ATF, and then they make it hard on us in the industry. But I think that $200 tax going away is wonderful. I think we obviously would like for it to have gone further, but I do also think that sometimes life, you see stepping stones, that people, as sales are going up, I find every year more and more legislators are familiar with these. They just have to continue to see they're not a public safety issue. And it's a good reminder that in Europe and almost really every country outside of the US, Canada, and Mexico, you can buy a silencer typically over the counter. And a lot of times they're not serialized because they're not seen as a public safety issue. So I think that more purchasing of them, more education of elected officials, and no issues from a public safety issue, I think benefits us long term as a gradual approach to a complete deregulation.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of lawsuits out there right now, trying to say, well, if there isn't a tax stamp, then you shouldn't even be doing your background. This should just be on 4473. And, I might get in trouble for this from some of my listeners, but I still think there needs to be something there to make sure that the bad people aren't getting it, because a couple bad people ruin it for everybody. And that's how it always is. But at the end of the day, they'll get their hands on it no matter what, right? No matter what we do, they are going to do what they're going to do. And I knock on wood, I hope that none of these end up in a situation, let me put it that way, that could really put them backwards 100 steps, because we've seen that. We saw it with Sandy Hook. We saw it with everything. They went after the companies, which is absolute bullshit. When I was at Remington, it was crazy, like the amount of that was there. And I think a lot of that protection should be there as well. Like, we can't control who it goes to. I mean, in the ATF or whoever, wherever it goes sells it, but there's got to be some sort of a track there. I don't know. It's hard, because no matter what you do, you're going to offend somebody. And I know you guys kind of went through people not understanding the place that you guys were there for a little bit, and I had messaged Logan and a couple of your guys, and I'm like, hey, how do you want me to respond to this? Sponsoring it. They're like, you know what? It is what it is. People will take it however they want to take it. But that was one big reason why I wanted you on here, because now they hear it from you saying that isn't what we wanted, and you guys took it completely wrong of what we were trying to push here. And I'm sure I'm still going to get people saying, oh, BS, but say whatever you're going to say.
Yeah, totally. I mean, even some additional perspective that I think is good, that I my understanding is that 4 U.S. senators, I don't know if it was together or individually, they sat down with the parliamentarian who they knew was going to rule on this during the whole budget reconciliation process. And they asked her, can we change the classification of a silencer to a regular firearm through the budget reconciliation process? And she said, no, I'm not going to approve that. And there's no way. And she probably said, you don't want to do that because it can get switched right back when the Democrats get in, and other things could be. So it has to be budget focused. So this was a discussion before the process even started. So we'd kind of come out and said, hey, let's look at all options. Do we have a fallback? Because we're already hearing that she's not willing to approve that. So I feel like some of the groups that were out there pushing for it to be completely deregulated, I think they were doing that probably for fundraising activities, because I feel sure if we heard that the parliamentarian already said she wasn't going to approve it, that they probably do that as well. So they were using it as a fundraising thing to try to raise as much money as they could. And then when it didn't go through, they were fine with, the fallback. But they were sort of against us saying, hey, we should look at all options in case we have to fall back. They thought that was the wrong approach. It's weird. I got a call, from a company that it was from an organization that we had never worked with before. And they were asking us to sign on kind of a no compromise letter. And I just told them it was difficult for me because the letter was to Senator John Thune. And my daughter is going to be like a collegiate athlete running, and that's really his hotspot. So I've gotten to know him pretty well at a lot of like track events, just because he goes to all the state events here in our state. He's a Senate Majority Leader. And then also go to church with him. So I was like, I don't feel comfortable sending a note to him that I wouldn't send to, it was very derogatory, like, you must do this. And if you don't do this, we're going to do this to you. And I was just like, I wouldn't feel comfortable sending that to anyone, especially someone I know. And so we had probably a looser position that, hey, we want whatever's good for our customers. So if it's a complete deregulation, that benefits us the best, we are for that. But if it's getting rid of the $200 tax stamp and that's as far as we can get, we're okay with that. So we kind of stayed neutral, which people didn't like. But, I feel like that we got some calls complaining. But what's interesting is I asked my sales team, I was like, of the calls we got complaining, how many of them were customers? I think there was 2. And I was like, well, after you talk to the 2 customers, what did they say? And they said, well, one of them bought another silencer and the other one said, okay, I probably heard something wrong, and they just hung up. So it was a lot of people that weren't our customers, and, maybe they weren't ever planning to do business with us. And, that's fine. I get it. But yeah, that was a tough thing to navigate and to know the right place to be. Because of course we did have the ear of our elected officials. And I was like saying, hey, this place will do a whole lot better if we can deregulate it. We can sell a whole lot more silencers. We'll get more manufacturing. We'll hire more people. So my 2 senators and congressmen were hearing that, and that was what they saw as a perspective from us being a local, really the largest firearms manufacturer in the state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It's all. I made this little guy a while back, and I was going to put him on a shirt. I'll send you a picture when we get off. But it's this dude, and he's got a rifle hanging on the wall, and he's sitting in his mom's basement, and he's got a heart of the mom tattoo on his leg, and it's just we called him the Typer Sniper because he didn't have anything better to do than stir shit, you know. And to your point, it is amazing to me how many people, you know, and I have the same issue with Straight Jacket, some of the other companies that I represent, but it's like how many people aren't your customer? They never will be your customer, but they have something to say because they don't have anything better to do at work or wherever they're at because of what they're doing. And it's like, you know, I've also noticed that a lot of my competitors are getting nasty and sending people, you know, to just comment and stir shit as well. And I'm like, I got enough respect for everybody else. We don't need to go down that path, you know. And I kind of saw that everybody kind of jumped on the bandwagon, and none of them knew the story. They just heard from somebody that, you know, had done this, and it just boggles my mind how many people believe the first thing that they hear. And you know, kind of off subject, but that's what scares me about AI. Because anymore, you don't know out there what's truth and what's not and what somebody's created. And a lot of people will not, you know, when we were kids, we had to go to the encyclopedia. We had to go to the dictionary to learn something. We had to ask a lot of questions. And now people just type it in their phone and whatever comes up is gospel. And and that seems to me like that's what happened. That somebody typed it, somebody wrote something or said something somewhere, and all of a sudden it was gospel and everybody believed it. And that's going to be a big problem to me in the next 5 to 10 years, especially in the industry of if we start getting attacked, what's going to happen there? You know, I did a video the other day about the new regulations in California. I can't even send a pre-fit barrel to California anymore. I have to send it to an FFL. The FFL, they have to go in and do until July of 2027, they can just go pick it up from the FFL. After July of 2027, they have to do a full background check on that barrel or accessories in California. So the problem is, and I'm going to freaking put my foot down here, is we as gun owners have got to start sticking together because they realize that they can't go after the gun. So they're going to go around everything else. Right now in California, it's 22% tax if you buy a rifle or a firearm or anything else. It went from 11 to 22. And now Washington, Oregon, some of those other ones are following suit. You know, I'm sure Colorado will be right there with them, and every other Democratic state's going to be through thing. And I know a lot of other companies that are in the position of me are not going to want to sell to California anymore because then California puts it back on whoever sold the product. So it's getting scarier and scarier as us in the industry building products to know where to send it or what to do. Because if that opens up the doors to whoever is responsible for selling it in the beginning, we aren't going to want to sell it to you. And it scares the crap out of me.
No, that's true. You know, you talked about some of the lawsuits. I mean, you know, one thing that we're doing here in South Dakota is like, there's like 17 states that if one of these lawsuits works where silencers are, you know, deemed protected by the Second Amendment and then they're treated like a regular firearm, it would basically do away with NFA overnight. You know, unfortunately in South Dakota, the statute says that if you own a silencer in South Dakota, it's not lawful unless you went through the federal registration process, is what they say. So we're getting that out, and I feel like we've got our governor on board with it, making that the first bill he signs, and even signs it on site here this year through the legislature when it starts, you know, in a couple weeks. So we're excited about that from a deregulation perspective, and you know, trying to work with some of the other states too to help them get their language out of their state law so that it's only regulated federally and not at a state. Because what you would hate is if one of these lawsuits wins, and then you have all these states where they're illegal because they have state laws kind of like we have.
Yeah. And I think to that point, a lot of people, and I don't know, I've never really researched this hard, but a lot of people are like, well, if you're at the range and you're shooting a suppressor, a local law enforcement guy can ask you about it. And I'm like, I don't think that's the case. So how does a state even maintain or even look? Because it is federal. So why would a state even want to be involved in, number one, the liability or even anything behind, because they have no control over it, right?
Yeah. And I think that, part of it is because they consider that Form 4 that you fill out to do the transfer a tax, form, so it's protected from privacy. So you're right. Technically, law enforcement can't even ask to see a copy of it if you don't have to share it with them if you don't want. Now, I know from my understanding is ATF, the sort of the people that do the, if you break a law, not the industry people, but the ATF on the criminal side, they can ask to see it. And I guess a treasury agent or the IRS can ask to see your forms. But yeah, I mean, the hard part with state law is they can make it harder than federal law. And they can just say, hey, you can't own them in the state, like where there's 8 states where they're illegal. Or, my concern too is, if it deregulated them and made them all where they're treated as a firearm, I do worry about it would be tough for us to fight each state, because I feel sure there would be states like, you're talking about Oregon and Washington State and Colorado. They would try to make them illegal in state law if they felt like it was deregulated federally. So there's a lot of little battles that, have to kind of be prepared for. Yeah, I could see Maryland, maybe trying to change it. There's, so it does open up a can of worms. It's the best thing that would happen is if federally, because I know the Hearing Protection Act has a lot of things in there that would preempt state law so that they couldn't come in and make it illegal. But the hard part there is you really need 60 U.S. senators that are willing to vote for it. And that's tough, which I think is more probable as we get more ownership out there.
Yeah. And I know that, the guys from Silencer Co. were some of the original ones behind that. And they put a lot of work and money into it, and then it never went through. But it just amazes me how many people are just scared. They're like, well, the people that voted for me want this, but I don't dare do anything about it. And I think that is something that I guess I never really thought about it. The more suppressors we have out there, the more silencers we have out there, the more people are going to try and fight for this. But it still boggles my mind how many gun owners there are. And a lot of us just kind of sit back and let things go without being involved in something bigger or trying to fight with it. But and I don't want to go down that road, but with a lot of these bigger companies that people have invested in and they see where their money went, instead of fighting back, it went to people's pockets within the hierarchy. Yeah. It scares you because as a person, as a normal guy that works, my job and does my thing, like who can I really trust to give my money to that's really going to fight for this? And I know there's a couple of them out there that are really trying to fight, but there's too many of them with their hand out and you don't know who to go to. If Brandon were to tell us today, like, these are who, if you really want suppressors to be off the list and you want to fight for your rights and everything else, who would you recommend that the listeners go, try to be a member of or try to donate their money to?
I would give money to Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, National Shooting Sports Foundation that, puts on SHOT Show. I mean, obviously I'm biased because I'm on both of those boards, but what I find is they have boots on the ground in every state so that they've got coverage at a state level. You got a big organization like NSSF. I feel like they filled the void with the NRA. I feel like that the Trump administration has sort of distanced themselves from, probably this is what I hear, that the Trump administration doesn't have a good relationship with the NRA. So the NRA is kind of silent in DC. I think they still have influence at a state level because they do have boots on the ground. But I just feel like NSSF really has boots on the ground so they can impact state legislators, but they also have the ear of the Trump administration. I think the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation does as well. I mean, some of these other groups, I'm not against them, but when I research them and when I talk to people in DC, they say that they're so radicalized that no one in DC is really listening to them. So I don't know, I guess they would say, hey, we'll send the mob on you and we'll make you listen. But I think that, some of the people in DC would say, hey, we feel like we keep getting beat up by them. You're going to be in a tough position if something goes sideways because we're not going to be able to stand up and defend you. So I think there's a bit of an adversarial relationship with some of the more radical groups in DC. But, the National Shooting Sports Foundation obviously is looking out for dealers. They want us to be able to sell more silencers. So they're going to fight for ways to deregulate them. Most of the biggest people on the board that I'm on, 100% of the rest of them are either retailers or large manufacturers like Smith & Wesson and Glock. And so those companies would all benefit from, a complete deregulation of silencers because then they would sell more of them and it would benefit the consumers. So, I like the SHOT Show and giving money to NSSF and then Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. I feel like those are safe ones to me.
Huh. Well, see, and that's what most people don't think about. They see somebody that's spending a lot of money on trying to get their voice out. And, if we had somebody in our ear, I guess if we took it that way and they were just crazy, telling people you've got to say this or you've got to do this or else, no one's going to listen to them, to your point. Like, especially, like if something happens, does anything come back on them? And I think that's the biggest scare of everybody is like, if I say yes or if I change something, will it ever come back to me? Because everybody's so scared of the fallout or the fallback. And I think that's probably why it took so long for this tax stamp to go away, because everybody was just scared. And I think that's one thing that Trump is not. He's not scared of anything.
I love it. I love it.
And I know Don Jr. very well, and I know Eric's the same way, and they're just both very 2A friendly. But and I thought about it the other day. I'm like, they could only do so much because there's so many fingers and so many controlling things, and if they're trying to do what they can, but you've got so many people that have so much say over it, and it ends up as the Supreme Court has a lot of say over everything, and you've got to try and do, to your point, baby steps, little steps to where we can get.
So, sort of on the subject of Trump. So, of course, we've got 2 terms underneath him. I mean, give him kudos for what he's done. I mean, basically, the first thing he did was fire the head of the ATF legal. I mean, a lot of the laws that we deal with on NFA were written in 34. A lot of the stuff in the Gun Control Act was 68. So it's very old and it's open to interpretation. So basically, whoever head of legal is at ATF determines what does and does not happen, because there's a lot of gray area and they just take the worst extreme. So that was beautiful that the second term, he got rid of that lady who was head of legal, and then he put his person that he wanted in to be the head of the ATF. And now they're actually working with us. I mean, when I was at lunch today, I get a call on my phone, and I've never gotten a call from this number before. It was a Florida number, and I use that robo, spam where they have to tell why they're calling or I don't take it. And it was actually the number 2 guy at the ATF. And he said, I just want to apologize for, he said, I know you're the largest submitter as a dealer of ATF e-forms. Our goal was to manage through this without any hiccups. We were working on this over the holiday, and we just want to reach out to you and apologize and tell you that if for some reason you're not getting a response from my team you need, I want you to use this cell phone number and call me. I can tell you with 100% certainty before Trump got in office, there's zero chance that would have happened. I mean, it was the exact opposite. I mean, they would have never done anything to try to work with us. They would have fought against us. I mean, so many things we would try to do, they wouldn't respond to us or put us off. But this group of people who've been put in charge during the second administration are very industry friendly, which benefits the consumer, and they don't see it and don't realize it. But there are a lot of benefits to who the right person in the White House is, and that they do the right stuff. I feel like they're trying to change a lot of stuff, and their goal is to get it where it's chained through the administrative process, so then it's not just a reversal of an executive order day one. So I do feel like the people that the current administration have put into the ATF are doing the right things. And I just hope that we can preserve them so it doesn't flip in the other direction as soon as, the White House has got a Democrat in there.
Right. And I don't know, I might get yelled at for this by our listeners, but I have a lot of very good friends that are in the ATF. I had a couple of them come give me an audit. They're not friends, but they're ATF agents. I got an audit last year and I still can't walk normally from it because they went deep, but they were very fair. They were decent. And I'm not going to name names, but a few of them have said, what, it's a lot easier to do our job right now. And we want to do it. When we have somebody looking over our shoulder nonstop and we're afraid to do something wrong, we have to go down this road. But with Trump in there and them being willing to work with, FFLs and different things, and granted, some FFLs shouldn't be doing business. I've done business with a few of them that ruin it for everybody else. But for the majority, 95, 98% of FFLs are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And it's awesome that the ATF are working with them. It's like me, they could have taken my license because of some of the stuff that from the company that I bought it from, what they did before. Yeah. And they were very decent. They're like, we're going to give you a couple of weeks. We need you to figure this out. When we do it, you're going to get your hand slapped, but we're willing to work with you. And I'm like, dude, I don't think that would have been the same thing even a few years ago. I probably would have got nailed to the ground. So to the point of these guys that are even the boots on the ground guys that are willing to work with the FFLs and everybody else. It's good, but I am scared, whoever the next president is, if we can keep going down this road of being able to work together so that the thing is the ATF's never going to go away. They are what they are.
Yeah, totally.
But the reach that they have can be adjusted a little bit, I think.
Oh yeah.
But and ATF gets a lot of shit, but there's a lot of good people within the ATF. There are.
Yeah, I mean, I do find when I go to the red states, they're typically, red employees. They're pro firearms. But then when you go to the blue states, you see blue employees who are kind of anti. So, yeah, because we have, I've got an FFL in 42 states. I had to meet with the ATF in each of those to get the interview and to get it set up. So it was interesting.
Yeah, that's a lot of freaking work. You've gone above and beyond. But I mean, I don't want to take up your whole day, but I just kind of wanted to get you on. You've done probably far and above more than any other suppressor company that I know of, that anybody knows of. So, and you're kind of that diamond in the rough that took a company from, going from show to show to what it is today. I mean, you just build a whole new big warehouse and you're growing, you're taking a lot of great employees from other places that I've noticed lately. Kind of mad at you there, because now I got to deal with somebody new. And I'm like, frick, really? Now who the hell do I deal with? But you're building that, in my opinion, as a business owner myself, is building the team, bringing in the right people. And everybody that I have met, and I'm not just saying this because they're a sponsor, and I'm not saying it to kiss anybody's ass or anything else. What I'm saying is, because if anybody that really knows me, I'll call somebody out. But everybody that I've met from Silencer Central up until now have been phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. From your marketing people, they've even sent customers my way for business.
Oh, cool.
So nothing but great. I've gotten a lot of cans. I've shared a lot of cans with other people that, I know have gone and bought it. I did a deal last year at Straight Jacket. I'm like, I don't want to do the paperwork. So I did a deal with Silencer Central. If you bought a can, then you guys did the background check and everything. And I just sent them to you for the business. So
sure.
There's a lot of cool stuff there that we've worked at. So kudos to you guys for growing at how you have, for doing what you've done, for kind of changing the industry, because a few years ago there was Silencer Shop, but it isn't on this level. It isn't this easy, and I've sent a lot of people your way, and I get texts like, holy shit, this was easy. And I'm like, yeah, it's easier than me doing it. I'd rather you just go to them and do it. I don't want to do it.
That's funny. No, that's good feedback. No, we appreciate it. I mean, I would say that, our core values are getting things done, expect excellence, and focus on the consumer. And we honestly, every quarter, sit down and go through every employee. And if they're not meeting all three of those, kind of vote them off the island, and we go through a process to get rid of them. It sounds, kind of harsh, but it works. I mean, to make sure you got the right people in the building and everyone knows what the expectations are, and everyone respects who's here because they know that they got to get vetted the same way every quarter. So no, I mean, we're proud of the team. I think that, one thing we've done differently is, I think a lot of people are almost ancestral in the industry. They feel like you can't hire anyone unless they've been in the industry. And we just try to have a different perspective. We always preferred to find people in the industry, but if we couldn't find someone that wanted to move to South Dakota and wasn't from the industry, we weren't bashful about hiring them. Because I felt like, me coming as a pharmacist, I feel like we've done really well. Not saying that the pharmacist was the key. It's just me having a different background and having a different perspective is not necessarily a negative.
Well, in the gun building side, and I'm not going to go too off on this, everybody has done the exact same thing for a lot of years, because that's just what everybody thought it had to be. It has to be this way because the guy that I learned from did it this way. And finally, I'm starting to see some changes. I'm starting to see some people thinking outside the box. We're trying to do it at Straight Jacket. Is like, how can we make this easier for the customer? Instead of trying to run up our prices, how do we make it more affordable by running faster or sourcing different parts or anything like that? And the outside the box view has not been there. And a lot of people, to your point, from the industry have been taught or brainwashed that this is the only way to do it. And a few of the people that I've seen you bring on lately have done phenomenal for the other companies. And I think it was stupid for the other companies to let them go, whether it was their choice or not. But, I'm like, shit, well, they're building the dream team. So good for you guys.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Perfect.
But in the end, is there anything you want to let everybody kind of know about you guys? What are, how is 2026 going to look? Anything?
Yeah, obviously 25 was a struggle because I was honest with you. I had to have the bank float me a loan to keep us in, because I don't want to lose anybody, but the revenue we were bringing in and the margins we were bringing in, you couldn't have kept anyone really. But I think 26 will be, really good. Just we had some inventory we were sitting on. I mean, our manufacturers that make for us, we still kept them busy and had them make stuff for us when we didn't really need it last year. But the goal was to, treat them right so they didn't retool and start working with other people. So I feel like we're, from an inventory perspective, in a good spot. I'd say the only thing we didn't mention that we're proud of at Silencer Central is we'll probably give close to $8 million last year to conservation. And so, basically anyone that has a nonprofit, typically military related or conservation, we give free silencers to those events. And then whatever it auctions for, they get to keep 100%. We're trying to beef up our veteran side this year because we work all these events on the conservation side and we know all those groups better. It was easier to establish that, but we have a good track record of giving back and want to continue to do that in 26 because we feel like it'll be a better year for us. So we want to give back to those consumer groups and the veterans community and also the conservation. But just a reminder that, we do give back, and $8 million last year. I mean, a lot of money to give to charity when, we were losing money last year just because, really no one was going to buy for the last 7 months of the year, knowing the tax stamp was going away come January 1st. So we had to eat the tax stamp knowing that we were going to run in the red. But, no, I think it's important for people to realize that we do give back and that our goal is to give back even more this year in 2026 because we're doing better. We can afford even more.
Well, that's good. Yeah, you guys have helped. I do that youth hunt, and I get suppressors every year for it and everything else.
Good.
People really enjoy it. People love a suppressor. I mean, I've never seen somebody complain about a free suppressor ever. And if they do, they probably need to be put into a mental place. But
totally, yeah.
But hey, I appreciate you taking the time to come on. It's good to have a conversation with you. And as a consumer myself, I always like to hear it from the horse's mouth. There's a lot of people out there that, this is who we are, this is what we are. But when it's from the boss, like it seems to sink in a little bit better for some people.
Oh, good. So I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to do it.
Yeah. So hopefully if you're listening, you've got some information out of this. Everybody's super positive towards 2026. The ATF is working harder than ever to make sure that it's a smooth transition. So hopefully it isn't another year wait for some of us if that goes through. But here we go. Here we are to see, and we're not changing it. So if you want to donate, maybe go through the NSSF or one of these other organizations to do it. And if you have anything for Brandon or Silencer Central, how do they reach out to you guys?
Yeah, just go to our website, silencercentral.com. And they can got a full call center with, people to help if you have problems, questions, trying to figure out which one you want, how to adapt it to your firearm. You can buy them on our website. Then we just do everything digitally back and forth. You can do it from your couch, never leave your house. Then we mail the silencer right to your front door. So goal is to make it easy. And if you're an FFL dealer out there that sells silencers and you haven't carried Vanish in the past, I encourage you to look at that, give that a shot. We feel like there's a lot of demand out there. We know based on how many we sell versus the ATF reports every year, how many everyone else sells. It's, one of the top brands out there. So if they haven't carried it, encourage them to look at it and give it a shot.
Okay. I appreciate you, Brandon, and maybe we'll have another conversation one of these days about something else besides guns, because it seems like that's all we ever talk about.
I like it. Whatever you want, we'll figure out a way to get it done.
Apparently, we need to go wolf hunting. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, heck yeah, for sure.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you.